Start again. My name is Ilana de Wild. I'm a part of the National Police of the Netherlands, as you can see, and I'm a project manager and senior advisor in the field of trafficking child sex offences. So, do you agree we all have a shared goal these days? Now we are here at the conference with 115 participants, which is amazing, I think, from around the world, talking about the same theme, violence against women. I have 3 questions for you, and if your answer is yes, please raise your hand. So which one of you is working in your life, familiar with domestic violence or sexual violence? Okay. And which one of you thinks the impact of sexual violence on victims is enormous and a serious issue for people and for society? Okay. And do you think sexual violence and sexual abuse is a problem of all countries? I need to find out how we're going to do this. So this is from our small area of expertise indeed the case that we see that sexual abuse is everywhere and that no country is free from it. And our common goal and our common interest today and tomorrow is to prevent new victimization and to bring to justice the people who suffer from sexual abuse. So now, what is the scope of my workshop? Because I don't want you to get lost, of course. I'm talking about trafficking child sex offenders, and we sort of define this by saying it's actually sexual abuse of children by a foreigner. So that's quite broad. And we also consider facilitators of the sexual abuse as offenders. So the people who enable people to get access to a child, etc. And I must say I'm absolutely grateful and happy to be in this position and to be able to contribute a bit. But at the same time, the suffering of the victims hits me quite hard every time I come across their stories. And I was lately in Paris at a meeting with a few European countries. And we were discussing how to convince people that their reports are very important for us. And after a few plenary sessions, we split into groups. There was one group for the investigation and one group for the care for victims. And I mean, normally, automatically I would walk to the investigations part, but this time I changed and I went to the victims part, and there was a Philippine lawyer, and she shared her experiences with us. And she worked on behalf of victims of sexual violence. And she was talking, and at a certain point, she started to cry really loud. So, okay, I mean, we know this is a sensitive topic, but we were still interested what's going on in her mind. And she said there is way too much focus on convictions and too much pressure to go after the offenders. And she said, this means something for the care for victims, because all the money in the Philippines goes to the Department of Justice to build capacity, to run actual cases. And there's little money left for the victims. And she said, on top of this, I know that some of the young victims I represent have found out that the shelter is not by definition a safe place to go to. Some of the victims I represent have been sexually abused again while staying at the shelter. I mean, this sort of stories, completely, the complete lack of safety for victims, that really breaks my heart, I must say. Welcome. So back to you again. From a police perspective, this was the former sheet. You are the eyes and the ears of local communities. And this is an important statement I want to make. And in this workshop, I want to share with you what the phenomenon of trafficking child sex offending looks like, why it is crucial to share information as much as possible. Welcome. And what you can do yourself to save children from sexual abuse. So, welcome. Trafficking child sex offending is a priority for the Dutch government. On a practical level, this means that the National Police and the Dutch Prosecutor's Office spend extra resources to strengthen the fight against trafficking child sex offending. And we only started to do so in 2013. And this was because two organizations triggered quite some political and societal pressure. And one of them is Ster des Hommes. You're probably familiar with them. They launched a report. I'm afraid it's only in Dutch, but you can look it up on their website. And the second important report was that of the National Rapporteur. We saw her this morning. And they have a summary in English. It's called Barriers Against Child Sex Tourism. And actually the main message of these reports is the government can do a lot more to track down offenders and to prevent offenders from reoffending and to protect victims. And I mean, we could only agree with that. So that's where we started to pay some extra attention to this topic. And there are a few elements of our thoughts on this topic. So we're no longer interested in actual borders when it comes to Dutch offenders. I mean, we see Dutch offenders operating in different areas, in different continents in the world. And under our laws, they're still punishable. We very much appreciate our cooperation with NGOs, with local law enforcement and other local key players. For example, we work together in different countries with the NGO ECPET, maybe you have heard from them. For example, on a project to raise awareness amongst embassy personnel, police liaison officers and local NGOs. And thirdly, as police, we think it's really important that victims are looked after. And I mean, it might not be our core business to do so, but at least we can serve their interests. So now, if we're talking about the phenomenon, what do we know about trafficking child sex offenders? Recent research has shown that it could be anyone. I mean, although you might think that it's that we're often talking about pedophiles, they're single, they're middle-aged, they're wealthy, they're white. We see in practice that offenders have different ages, different backgrounds, different social behavior. We're not only talking about men, there are women amongst them as well. And of course that's quite a small group, but they're there. And there are actually three elements which we see across this whole group. And these elements are in itself, I mean, really positive. It's good that there's anonymity for you as a person, that there's mobility and that digitalization is growing and getting better. I mean, those are in itself perfect normal elements, but when you combine them with this type of crime, we see that offenders travel to other countries, to abuse in other countries, and they're just away from their own home. They think their own government has no oversight anymore, so they're sort of out of sight. And the country they're going to, they're often unknown as well. These type of offenders often go to places where they know there's impunity, where they know that there's a lack of good care for children, that child protective systems are not really in place. And some examples of these are, for example, areas that are destroyed by the violence of nature. So when that happens, we see that sort of attracts certain people who want to abuse children. The same for orphanages, which are a bit smaller maybe and not really looked after by the government. Remote areas is getting more and more popular, where also the government is not really visible. So this whole idea of getting out of sight is something they're looking after for. And then there's of course mobility. Well, we know this. I mean, more and more people work around the world. It's quite normal to spend a few years of your working life in another country. There are cheap tickets. It's really easy to travel. So this is helping as well. Well, helping. And I would like to elaborate a bit on this mobility thing. Because we're talking about this idea of foreigners traveling to another place to abuse. But actually, looking at child sexual abuse, the largest group are nationals, just nationals who abuse children in their own country. So, I mean, if we're looking at quantitative figures, that's how it looks like. So that's in the country itself or in the region. And the group which really travels internationally to abuse children is of course there, but is a lot smaller. So that's why I also think it's important that countries just organize themselves first nationally, on the national level, like we did in the Netherlands. And then it makes sense to have a look at foreigners as well. So lastly, this digitalization. Darknet is used a lot for offenders to find each other, to connect to people and to find out where to go. And I must say the use of Darknet also makes it more difficult for law enforcement to track down offenders. It's just more hidden, and these digital options make offenders more invisible and anonymous. And secondly, looking at the world, of course the internet is everywhere. So now, no matter how poor people are, mobile devices are within reach, and internet connectivity is there also. So, I mean, from the development and economical side, this is of course great. But it means that it's very simple to use the internet and mobile devices to actually upload child abuse material and share it with other countries. And a third thing is that online payments are of course more and more easy to organize. So money transfers, for example, can be made from and to almost all countries. I want to share 2 cases with you to give you some insight in the world of traveling child sex offenders. And these stories might help you to become aware and to recognize suspicious situations more easily. Law enforcement cannot tackle the crime alone. I mean, this is why we think cooperation is so important. And I mean, you, again, are the eyes and the ears in our communities. So you could find yourself in a suspicious situation. First, I want to show you a case that has recently been covered by Dutch media. The item was broadcasted on the RTL 4 channel. A famous Dutch reporter, Peter R. de Vries, is a guest in a show called Boulevard. And Peter has also his own program, and he was already tracking down and confronting Jouke M. in 2008. This person was convicted in the Netherlands for sexually abusing vulnerable children. So here we're talking about children who were mentally disabled and also physically. And he was giving them drugs before the abuse took place. So now Jouke M. presented himself as a benefactor and a therapist. He organized chakra healings, and those healings would have a positive effect on children, he said. well, back in 2008, the reporter Peter said he was afraid that this man, Jouke, would harm children again and that he would never learn from his mistakes. And Peter turned out to be right, unfortunately. So last September, the 67-year-old Jouke was arrested in Mindanao on the Philippines, doing exactly what he has done in the Netherlands several years ago. And I want you to see a few minutes of this media item. Hopefully the sound is there.
Veroordeelde pedofiel die loopt opnieuw tegen de lamp. Ja, jaren geleden heb ik deze man al eens op heterdaad betrapt. En toen kwam ik tijdens een verborgen cameraactie letterlijk uit de kast. Nu is hij op de Filipijnen door de politie betrapt en gaat hij in de kast. Een oude bekende dan, opgepakt in de Filipijnen. Pedo Joep M. is 9 jaar geleden al eens een keertje veroordeeld voor seksueel misbruik. Maar na zijn vrijlating zocht hij meteen in contact met gehandicapte kinderen. De viezerik. Nu is hij wederom tegen het lam gelopen. Ja, dit is inderdaad een oude bekende van mij. Ik heb in 2008 al een keer een uitzending over hem gemaakt. Het is een pedofiel met een lange witte baard. Doet aan Sinterklaas denken, maar is alles behalve een kindervriend. Integendeel, hij heeft gehandicapte kinderen die lichamelijk en geestelijk gehandicapt waren op verschrikkelijke wijze misbruikt. Hij is daarvoor gepakt en veroordeeld en ik weet nog dat ik aan het slot van mijn uitzending in 2008 zei van nou dit zal niet de laatste keer zijn dat we van hem horen, deze man gaat waarschijnlijk gewoon door. Toen was al bekend dat hij naar de Filipijnen zou gaan en godzijdank heeft de Nederlandse politie hem in de gaten laten houden en laten we maar even kijken waar dat toe geleid heeft.
In 2006 wordt pedoseksueel Joep M. veroordeeld voor het seksueel misbruik van gehandicapte kinderen.
De rechtbank spreekt van een man die nimmer oog heeft voor de schade die hij bij zijn slachtoffers heeft aangericht en legt er een forse straf op. De raadsheren van het gerechtshof vinden een gevangenisstraf van 4,5 jaar daarom op zijn plaats.
Direct na zijn vrijlating gaat hij weer op zoek naar nieuwe, minderjarige slachtoffers. Peter R. de Vries ontmaskert de recidivist in een van zijn uitzendingen.
Zo, goedemiddag Joep. Ik ben net als jij een pedojager die undercover werkt. Volgens mij heb ik er een op heterdaad betrapt. Dat heb je niet. Ja, dat heb ik wel. Ik heb hier een vonnis in mijn handen waaruit blijkt dat jij zelf voor pedofiele activiteiten een zware gevangenisstraf hebt gehad. En je zit hier een vrouw die bezorgd is om haar misbruikte kind, zit je een verhaal op de mouw te spelden.
En nu loopt Joep op de Filipijnen opnieuw tegen de lamp. Hij wordt naakt in zijn woning aangehouden.
Agad na matwiran sa NBI kung bakit siya nakaupa.
And somebody pursuing home like this, trying to get ready to have a bath, to go to the bathroom, is not a crime either.
Napagalaman din katabi ng suspect na matulog ang 2 bata. Habang ang misis niya ay natutulog naman sa kabilang kwarto. Bago matulog may pinapainom pa raw ng gamot sa mga bata ang dayuhan.
Een van die 2 kinderen, de oudere meisje van 14, die heeft inderdaad verklaard dat het niet iets eenmaligs is, maar dat hij al 5 jaar lang dat kind op een systematische wijze aan het misbruiken is.
De Nederlandse politie heeft alles op alles gezet om ervoor te zorgen dat Joep M. opnieuw gepakt en vervolgd zou worden voor wat hij gedaan heeft.
We hebben sinds een jaar of 2 hebben wij op de Filipijnen, in Manila, hebben wij een Nederlandse politiehond gestationeerd die zich specifiek bezighoudt met de bestrijding van kindersekstorisme. En daarin zoekt hij contact met politiediensten om op die manier die mensen te helpen met het opsporen van Nederlandse kindersekstoristen.
Wat de politie betreft wordt die samenwerking nog veel verder uitgebreid en wordt deze zaak op de Filipijnen afgehandeld.
Een van de allerbelangrijkste redenen daarvoor is dat uit gesprekken die ik zelf daar ook gevoerd heb met slachtoffers, die aangeven het is ontzettend belangrijk dat in de media, dat in de publieke opinie duidelijk wordt dat in onze landen daar ook iets aan gebeurt. Dat daar ook overtreders van dergelijke vreselijke strafbare feiten, dat die in ons eigen land worden veroordeeld. En ja, wij juichen dat van harte toe.
Ja, je maag draait zich om. Hè. Dit is echt een onverbeterlijke, notoire pedofiel die maar doorgaat. Die vieze baard. Ja.
Weet je wat mij verbaast? Dat jij in ieder geval al zei bij zijn aanhouding van deze man gaat, dat heb je met een reden gezegd.
Ja, zeker. Ja.
En dat jij dan in principe op die basis al gelijk hebt. Waarom hebben ze die man niet?
Nou ja, kijk, ik wilde hier toch nadrukkelijk zeggen, hulde voor de Nederlandse politie.
Zeker, maar
Die juist toen deze man naar de Filipijnen ging, meteen via een liaison officer, die ze in Zuidoost-Azië hebben, ik heb hem gesproken van de week, die heeft telkens daar in de Filipijnen aan de bel getrokken en gezegd, let op deze man, hou hem in de gaten. Die gaat waarschijnlijk weer hetzelfde doen wat hij in Nederland deed met gehandicapte kinderen, onder het mom dat hij een soort van weldoener en genezer is. En deze man, die liaison officer, die heeft daar dus telkens op gewezen met als resultaat dat deze vent nu op heterdaad echt betrapt is. Hè. Hij werd naakt gearresteerd, die kinderen eromheen. En die gaat nu berecht worden. Dus ik vind dit een heel mooi voorbeeld van hoe de Nederlandse politie in het buitenland heel effectief bezig is. Want dit soort gasten, die vluchten vaak naar landen als Cambodja, Thailand, Filipijnen, omdat ze denken dat ze daar vrij spel hebben. Maar de Nederlandse politie is daar behoorlijk alert. Gelukkig maar.
Yeah. So, okay, some offenders are indeed white, somewhat older, male, pedophile, as we can see. I have truly mixed feelings about this case. I mean, on the one hand, it's great that he has been caught and he cannot abuse children anymore. But on the other hand, it was 7 years ago that he left the Netherlands to go to the Philippines. So what did he do in the meantime? I mean, we're not sure about this. This is where the investigation needs to give some answers. But yeah, it sort of frightens you. So this shows us a few elements of this type of crime. So as you could see, this doing good as a cover for child abuse, we see that a lot. And we see also that people connect to smaller NGOs to go and work for NGOs, to go and help. And sometimes, that's not out of the right reasons, so to say. The other thing which you can really see with this man is that he's really part of the local community. So he lives there, he also worked there, he has his network in this community. And his actions and his behaviors must have caused suspicion amongst locals. In this particular case, it is almost impossible that nobody that lived near the premises of this man knew what was going on. Right before his arrest, 10 children were spotted on the premises. So now, I'm not sure, but I can imagine that the suspicions around this person and the possibility of sexual abuse became sort of a public secret. And of course, as law enforcement, we are aware that it is sometimes difficult for people to report something because, for example, the foreigner is bringing in money into the communities. And the fact that victims are often bribed or threatened, and their family members as well, makes it also more difficult to bring these offenders to justice. So, as you could see in this video, we have stationed police liaisons around the world. Of course, not in all countries. We're a small country ourselves. But few of them are really dedicated for this particular theme. And I mean, these liaison officers who work at embassies are important in general because they can support local government to detect child abuse and to act on it. So they really sort of push for this agenda setting. And we know from experience that local governments will pay more attention to this topic when they see other countries' active involvement. So that really works, we think. When we look at the different type of offenders, we can roughly say there are 3 groups. There's the group, so to say, of long stay, so people who actually live abroad, for example, to enjoy their pension, or who work abroad on a voluntary basis or whatever, doesn't matter. And the second group is more the short stay group, so people who travel for business purposes or tourism purposes, and who are, for example, looking for dynamic nightlife, who go to places where prostitution or even sex tourism is stimulated. And thirdly, and that's more the virtual side of things, is this group of webcam sex tourists, as we call them. They're enjoying the comfort of their own home, so they don't travel, and they demand online for live streaming of webcam sex. So now, I mean, in the whole adult entertainment industry, we also see this, of course, but it's, yeah, I must say, much more shocking if it's related to children. And that's where I want to share a bit about this third type. So there we also see roughly two sort of types. The first one is spending a lot of time online. He's actively looking for contact with children on the internet. And I mean, this could start very innocent. They just connect. And in the end, eventually, if they have built up trust, etc., they request or they give instructions to the receiver. And these instructions might, in the end up in child sexual abuse. But it's, I mean, that could take years, for example. It's not always the same. And now then, I think a big question is, so how to prevent this? Children can, of course, be trained to learn how to act online. So it's absolutely necessary to guide children who have access to internet. I really hope you will take this message with you back home. Some online predators are present in chat rooms. So now, this could be chat rooms which are connected to games for children, for example. So we see in the Netherlands, a mother thinks, oh, my child is quietly playing a game on the computer. And that's great, now I have some time for myself, but please be alert. I mean, ask your child what game he or she is playing. And is there a possibility to chat? And do you speak with your children about their chatting behavior? And you could ask a child, are you being approached by people who you do not know? So another thing we advise parents to ask is, except for the question, how was your day at school? Also asking, how was your day online? I mean, just integrate it in normal life. And I think that really helps a lot, just to raise awareness among children. So a second type of webcam sex tourist simply goes online and pays to see child sexual abuse, which can be seen via live streaming services. And I mean, this is not really, it is already kind of a horrific topic, but we see from our different law enforcement partners and ourselves that this is really rising. So this phenomenon, I mean, it's not a new phenomenon, it's there, but we really see that it's getting more popular every day. So the idea is that people just pay and then they are free to ask a few things and to sort of guide what they see. And somewhere else in the world the abuse is taking place. So it's really on a distance. And I must say there's a strong supply side in this. And then the demand automatically follows. And this leads us to a second case we recently had. And that's a case with a lot of international connections. So, and this live streaming of child sex abuse is part of it. We're talking about, again, a Dutch suspect. He is called X, let's say. And X came inside of, in one of our investigations because he was in contact with one of the other suspects a lot. And then we got information about the same X from an international operation done by another country. And this information told us this person X, he did a lot of money transfers. More than 15 transfers were made from the Netherlands to the Philippines. Well, if we in our sort of subject hear something like this, for us this is alerting. Further investigation on X led to the following thing. We had a house search, and there we found a huge amount of child sex abuse images on his computer. And there was actually evidence of sexual abuse of 4 children in 2 different European countries. There was evidence of X sharing these images with a contact in South Africa. And last but not least, there was evidence of several sessions of live streaming of webcam sex in at least 2 Asian countries. And there were also several children involved. So eventually we found out that the money was sent to a woman in Asia, and she had forced her daughter to perform sexual acts. And I must say, for her, it was just big business, and it was really helping the family. I mean, you know what I mean by helping, financially. In this case, we can distinguish different types of crimes at the same time, committed by the same suspect. So on the one hand, there's this possession and distribution of the material, and there's also the hands-on sexual abuse, the webcam sex part, which, I mean, if you're paying for that, you're at the same time then an accomplice, of course, of the hands-on abuse. I mean, you're not doing this yourself, but you're doing something which actually evokes this type of crime. And what we also often see is there's a combination with human trafficking. So people are, or I must say children are brought from the one place to the other. Could be an area where prostitution is flourishing. So then that's where human trafficking is also one of the crimes we're looking after. So now this case also shows why we think we should really cooperate internationally, and we shouldn't do anything on our own as the Netherlands. We're part of the Virtual Global Task Force. This is an international network of law enforcement partners, of NGOs, and of private companies. And they all have the same goal, and that is to, yeah, as they say, stay safe online. Their main focus was the online child abuse, but now it's expanding more because we always see this linkage between online and offline abuse, so we think should be a bit broader. And the idea of the network is to combine forces and to jointly work on good practices. And another thing is that we really want to avoid duplication. I mean, I must say in law enforcement it's sometimes crazy. We all want to do good, we train countries, etc., but it's all quite separate and not really structural. So this is what we're really looking after for, is to find a way to cooperate, to look at someone's expertise. So if country A is good in this, then we shouldn't all do the same, just leave this over to country A, and it would really help if we started to work like that. I have only 5 minutes left. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever considered reporting a suspicion on child sexual abuse, whether this was during your work or during your personal life? Have you ever thought about it? Yeah, 2 people, 3? Okay, this is actually really representing well how it works in practice. Unfortunately, underreporting is a major issue when we're talking about sexual abuse. So victims as well as witnesses have several reasons for keeping quiet. And as you might expect of me, I would like to stress the importance of gathering information. I mean, as law enforcement, we try to find out what happened, and we gather information, for example, about the images. So we want to know, okay, who is on it? Can we identify a victim? Can we identify a location? Who else is involved? And eventually, the case itself needs to be as clear as and solid as possible, and the judge needs a clear overview about the illegal activities of a suspect. And sometimes small pieces of information can really mean a breakthrough in a case. So that's why we really believe we should stimulate people to report what they know. although you might think by yourself it's nothing, it's only a detail, that detail can really be important for us. So now you might wonder, okay, but what am I going to share then with the reporting sites or with police? Well, there are a few things which are really interesting for us, and it's not only about the offenders. I mean, we really need information about the victims as well. Because without a victim, we cannot have convictions. That's really the case. So, yeah, as you can see, all sort of details are interesting. And we're also aware, of course, that it might be difficult to report suspicious situations because it feels like you're accusing somebody of or something which might not be there. And you think maybe if it turns out that the person is innocent, the report might be harmful in the sense that the person might lose his job or something alike. But please know that reporting a situation is not the same as pressing charges. I mean, you are sharing information about the person, and then it's a responsibility of law enforcement to investigate, and in the end, the judge will decide. I mean, it's not that all reports anyway lead to an investigation. So now looking at the world, what are the options to report? That's in Hope. Maybe you have heard of it. It's a network worldwide. A lot of countries, I don't know by heart how many, I think, 45 or something, have this hotline. It's a website and a telephone number, and it really explains, okay, what are we talking about? What can you report? And also, I mean, all hotlines are really strict in confidentiality, so everything will be kept confidential, and there's even a distinction between the police and the hotlines. Hotlines get the information, but if you don't want to share this with your name, the police will never know who gave the report, so could be done anonymously. And the second one I want to mention is reportchaldsextourism.org. This is also connected to a few countries. It's more the European side of things. And the two will start to work together, of course. This is another area where we want to avoid duplication. And now, of course, these days we're talking a lot about victims. And that's really good, of course. But I also want to say that we should think about the offenders as well. I mean, it's really important to give them a helping hand as well. For example, people who struggle with pedophile feelings, we shouldn't turn away from that. We should do something. And this Stop It Now is an interesting initiative in a few countries for people just to call anonymously to get help. And that should be part of the strategy always, to look after the victims, but also, yes, look after the offenders.